So we asked Graham to stand in. Fabulous Graham Cox, technician in his own right. So he's a stick. So he can't let us know about 20 minutes ago. And he was also one of our speakers tonight. But he did do us a big favour of sending us his slides. The only problem is we had no idea what it was. So I've deleted them again from the slide deck. And we'll do it as a follow-up. We'll do a really nice follow-up. We'll get Graham to record it on some sort of Loom or whatever, and we'll post it out to you guys, publish it, etc., etc. So that'd be great. But the good news is our main speaker tonight, Matt Holman from Group Civilized. I think a big round of applause for Matt. Absolutely outstanding. Now, of course, the problem is when you've got no AV and a whole bunch of people who've got no idea how to work with clips, it takes an awful lot of people, an awful lot of time to not really go very far. So you see, what we've actually got is a light ring with Rose's phone in there. We think we've got the StreamYard starts now. We're going to press go live, but we already have. We have pressed go live. So potentially we're streaming to millions of people right now. I think we can be a bit more excited. We're streaming to millions of people right now. That's that's far in the spirit of things. So as you can probably tell, I'm spitballing this a bit, so I've got to fill up a small gap there. Let's not worry about that. So we've got the Mentimeter slides up. You've all used Mentimeter before. Let's hope it works. That's some Wi-Fi for here. So it's just +X guest. You don't need a password. Make sure you can all log on. That'd be great. And then if you go to this one, we've got the Mentimeter details up there, which if you look at the QR thing through your phone, it will let you join the Mentimeter. We're going to need that for asking questions of our guest speaker tonight, Matt, who's painting in us in anticipation ready to get on with his tour, which is amazing. We've also got a guest here tonight. You're sure you've all met him. Lovely fan who's wandering up and down. Very friendly dog. It's a lovely boy. Do love fan. So tonight, Eutopia versus Dystopia. And that's really the sort of overarching theme. But essentially, Matt is going to be talking to us about AI and the future of work and AI and sustainability. Two absolutely vital, critical, totally important aspects of adoption of AI within our community, within our city, within the UK, within Europe, so on and so on and so on. So we're looking forward very much to that. We've got all our leads here tonight, apart from Graham and Martin. Graham's not well, Martin's abroad. We've got Mary here. Say hi to Mary. Big hi, Mary. Very good. And we've got Tuli, our new co-leads right here. And we've got Rose, who's our AP staff. We also have at the back there, hiding, munching, is one of the founders of Brighton, Brighton in London. Very good. Just a quick word on +X innovation. Kerry, would you like to come and take the mic? No, Sam, sorry, I forgot.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam, I'm the marketing manager here at +X Innovation. So I can see familiar faces here, but if you've not been here before, so +X Innovation is an innovation hub. So the way that we differ from your traditional sort of workspaces is that we offer three key pillars. So the first being our specialist facilities. These are included in such as our prototyping workshop, our photography studio, with a podcasting suite, and event spaces, including the one that we're in now. We also have our innovation programs, so we have the business support for industry experts as well, to help our members grow within the space as well. Thirdly, we have our community, which is a real important part of our hub and how we operate, really. So we have a thriving community of innovators that we connect through networking events and weekly member socials, such as games and sort of business like that. So we're excited to offer a really good offer called Co-working Week. It starts in June, so it's 16th to 20th of June, and it's a completely free week that you can experience. Yeah. Sure. So you get completely free access to all of our facilities, and including mentioned. And then you can also go to our member event as well, which is on the Friday, and also our programming on Thursday, which is an event around leadership and resilience, with Steve Charlton, who's a leadership expert. So he'll be giving some really good tips and tricks for anyone that's a manager of a team, that's how to manage through change. So we're not expecting any, sorry. We're not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if you do a fire alarm go off, we have fire exit here, and just behind you over there. And our refuse point is just going to be in the car park, just around the corner. And once we've checked and made sure that there's no fire, and one of the team will pop around and invite you back into the building. So we have 3 members of staff on the premises today, myself, Kerry at the back there, and Leslie over here, and we're all health and safety training. If you have any questions around the building, our facilities, and any of our programs, or co-working week, please let me know. You can sign up for co-working week just on the flyers, just on your seats. It will provide all the information you need, and it will take you straight through to the sign-up page. So it'd be lovely to see you all there. Thanks so much.
Outstanding. I've got to say that Sam's first time out since he did his presentation and training skills for exciting. Absolutely brilliant. So, moving on with the agenda nice and quickly so Matt can get started. As you all know, or most of you know, Brighton AI is one of the meetup groups and sits under the fabulous Silicon Brighton umbrella. And without Silicon Brighton, we would not be here doing what we do. We've had so much support from the guys and continue to do so. They're a marvellous organisation, 40 plus digital communities, thousands of members, hundreds of sponsors, and they do really good work in our community right across the whole technology space. Does anybody here not know Silicon Brighton as an organisation? 1 or 2. Okay. Do take the opportunity tonight to grab Grace. She can tell you all about it. They're an amazing organisation. And in that theme, they're running a unique event in July, which is Evolve 25. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's all about technology. It's all about ethical implementation. It's all about the challenges we will face and the opportunities that exist and so on. Brighton AI will be taking the booths and running some workshops. We're also going to be up on stage, spouting our messages of hope and tranquility and peace and freedom and all the other good stuff that we like to talk about. So it's going to be really quite wonderful. And that is, what is it, 4th of July? It's my birthday. So if you do come to Evolve and you see me, card, presents, drinks, I'm open to all offers. Right. Fantastic. Introducing Graham. Paul Graham, AI update, and Graham, it's not well. You will send a message, wishing him all the best, that'll be great. Tonight's main guest is Matthew Holman, lying in his own shoes over here. He is an expert, a through and through expert in the whole field of law and of AI, of technology. I'll let Matt do the rest of the introduction himself, but he basically works for Cripps up in London. I think you're one of the only solicitors firms that is a B Corp, which I think deserves a round of applause. Lawyers as a B Corp, that is absolutely amazing. And Matt is going to lead us through a couple of topics. First of all, AI in the workplace and what it means for the future of work, and secondly, online sustainability. So I've bored you long enough. I'm desperate for a beer, so I'm going to hand over to Matt. Matt, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Too many Matts. Or actually, a lot of Matts. Maybe a good thing, because at least you kind of name them. It's lovely to see you. Thank you for having me. A few things before I forget them. The first is the Cripps, which has an office in London, office in Traffic Dwellers, and an office in Horsham. We have a thing called an AI toolkit. So if any of you are interested in that, find a Cripps person and talk to us afterwards. It's about AI governance, compliance, and process. A bunch of us who also do loads of AI training. That is essentially training around governance, ethics, contracts, negotiations, and stuff like this. It's not how to code, although I'd love to get to that point at some time. And all the other boring things that lawyers do. I am the boring lawyer. There are some other boring lawyers here as well. As are all the Cripps boring lawyers. So that is the commercial plug, which I have to do before I forget it. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So the original Matt gave me a very nice intro. I have been a solicitor for around 20 years. I did a degree which was in law and sociology, which also contain modules on philosophy and theology. And some of that is going to come and play tonight in one form or another. And I'm expecting, if nothing else, for us to have a really good debate. Can't do a degree like that without firstly being in the university debating team, and also just generally loving a good argument. Qualified in law, went on to do legal practice, and I was working in the Northwest. Anyone from the Northwest? Manchester, Liverpool, Preston, the whole lot. Come on, the Northwest. It's like here, but really rainy and significantly colder. So I worked at one final then, and around about the time that I was a very baby lawyer, so probably about 25, I looked even younger than now, even geekier than now. And I was working for a law firm, and there was no such thing as really data protection, AI advisory, even really intellectual property was very nascent then. This is going back almost 20 years. And the managing partner of the firm was an M&A lawyer. Do you know what M&A lawyer is? Someone who buys and sells companies. Yeah, usually, has anyone seen Suits? Yeah, think Suits, but nowhere near as cool. And certainly nowhere near as much money either. And so we were selling a software company. And Park comes into the group and is like, we need a young lawyer who looks essentially like a Star Trek geek to come and understand how this company works so we can sell it. And he sort of looked at me and was like, you tick the box. You are young, strange looking, very Star Trekky. You could possibly be Spock. Come on. And so my job was basically to immerse myself in this company, which I did for about 3 months. I met the founders, I met the coders, I met people who built the database. It was a company that was basically building a consumer platform. And they were being bought by some Americans, and my job was to write the contracts, do the due diligence, and explain to them how it all works and negotiate. And I loved that. That was so much fun. At the end of that, I said, that was really great fun. I'd love to do more of that. And the managing partner, he was 65 and I was 25, had to be on the shoulder and basically said, listen, son, no one's ever going to pay you to do data protection and technology law. Come be an M&A lawyer, rest of us. At which point I was like, yes, of course not. But in my head I was thinking, not a chance. I don't want to be like you guys at school. So I left. So then I went to work in another firm. I met these guys. And then eventually joined the Crips where I met this guy at the bank. And we do lots of very geeky, very interesting, very theoretical tech law. I tell you all of that, partly because it gives you a strange insight into my life, and partly because my journey to this point here has been one where I've lived at a constant intersection between the law of data protection, the law of intellectual property rights, the law of contracts, the governance of these things, only the ethical framework that sits around them. I've never done one exclusively, I've always done them all together, which means when it comes to AI, a fairly interesting and slightly unique job description, which means I can do it hopefully reasonably well. Tonight, I'm not going to bore you with AI law. I can already feel the disappointment. If you'd like me to read the EU actually, we can do that. This would be the most boring session ever. Don't tune off. I'm only kidding. We're not going to do that, okay? I'm not going to bore you with the UK policy position on much of this stuff, except the points where it becomes necessary. And we're not going to look at the rest of the world, legal, or contracts, or any of the stuff that actually makes a lot of life. Instead, we're going to talk about something which is of great significance to all of us. There are two things. The first is AI, workplace augmentation and displacement, which is boring lawyer talk for, are we all losing our jobs to robots? And the second thing we're going to talk about is AI and the environment, AI and sustainability. What is the macro impacts here? We're going to look at some data, the most recent versions of various reports, and we are going to talk about it together. I'm definitely not going to talk at you about it. I've been to enough law events where someone looking a little bit like me stands at the front and then talks. And after a while, the audience is like, oh, mercy. Actually, it was the guy who did the I don't know where he is, the guy who did the intro thing for plastics. That was really good, by the way, wherever you are. I laughed and said there's no fire alarm, just because it reminded me of time about 2 years ago when I was doing a talk and there was a fire alarm in the talk and we all had to get up and go. That's not the funny bit. I picked up my and you know how you sort of get into the huddle. Well, these 2 women were out 3 people ahead of me, and one of them turned to their friend and went, "God, I'm glad that alarm's gone off." So hopefully we'll have a little bit more fun. This is not going to be lecturing you, this is us debating together about some of the really big stuff. Before we do that, Matt, Thompson, if people do want to talk, are we going to give them a mic? Are you going to give them a mic?
I'll run round with the mic.
He's going to run around and give you the mic. All right. So, big topic 1, AI in the workplace, and the future of jobs. Now, I'm going to give you some stats to start, because by no means where we end. Who has heard of the IPPR? There's no reason why you would necessarily. Sounds to be public policy research. In March 2024, they produced a very, very interesting paper. I'm going to reference a couple of times. It is called Employment and Productivity Scenarios, and it sounds a bit dull. It's actually quite easy to read. It's fascinating for our purposes because it's the first significant study into the impact of AI, specifically Gen AI, and very specifically in the United Kingdom. Most other studies are worldwide or Western worldwide. And so there's a natural degree of dilution in the market of those things. This one starts here. It has 3 different scenarios that it plays through. If I was showing you the slide, I'll put this presentation up, but I'll just describe it to you. It's relatively easy to talk about. The first is augmentation only. Do you understand roughly what I mean by augmentation? It means that AI comes into your world and it does your job with you and you do it together. It's augmented to parts of your world. The second is augmentation with displacement. This is where AI augments some parts of the tasks that you do and displaces others. So for me, as a lawyer, I spend a lot of time looking at contracts. And do several things with them. First is I'm writing. And the second is I pick up the phone and say, "Hey, client, did you know that this clause is really bad?" And then the third is I go off to other lawyers and I argue in front of them. And if I were an applicant, I would do that in front of the court. Displacement and augmentation says that maybe the first one of those jobs I don't need to do anymore. Because the AI can do it. The AI can read, think, it can challenge. It has experience and depth of knowledge, and it has a limited database to look at. However big my database is, it's going to be flawed with where am I keep and who's picking up my kids and how do I get to Brighton? But there are other parts of it that aren't in that scenario. So augmentation and displacement. So for example, the AI is not likely to go to the court and argue, at least not yet. The last of the 3 scenarios in the IPPR report is displacement only. This is where all of the tasks that I can do or you can do are displaced. These are the things the IPPR report looks like. Now, in its 5-year projection, it says that if scenario 1 plays out, that is augmentation of task-based jobs in the UK economy only, we are likely to see about 13.4% increase in GDP. GDP, sorry. That's about £305 billion on the current economy. So augmentation and productivity, big uptake. If we see augmentation and displacement over a 5-year period, it is actually likely to result in about less than half of that growth, so 1.44 billion or 6.3% of GDP. And of the displaced tasks, we're talking about roughly 4 million jobs. To be clear, that's 4 million displaced jobs. In a displacement-only scenario, interestingly, there is almost no gain to GDP. and there are about 8 million displaced jobs. To be clear, that's 8 million people's jobs. So they don't know roughly how many employed people there are in the United Kingdom at present. It's about 53 million, sorry. Yeah, about 53 million. So we're talking about a decent percentage of the working population. Just pause and reflect on that for a minute. Now, shortly, we're going to start a bit of discussion about what is best there. Interestingly, the IPPR report isn't particularly charging into the rights and wrongs of this. It is just conducting analysis, producing reports. What's more interesting is that that report pretty much went unpublished in lots of places. It got a little bit of a trickle in the press, but then whatever next was happened, and so it didn't really become a big story. It did, however, have significant traction in central government, and part of my job, one of the several parts of my job, is doing policy work with the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, and the increasingly Cabinet Office, where we talk about this stuff. So, out of interest and for my curiosity, let's try an experiment. Put your hand up if you think that scenario 1 is the most likely scenario. So 5 years from now, jobs will be augmented only, not displaced in any way. Oh, okay, so no. What about scenario 2? Augmentation and displacement. Put your hand up if you think displacement only. Let's be arguments for argument's sake. My friend says that I was born arguing, and I find it ironic because she's really argumentative. Most of you are going middle. Now, the interesting thing about the middle option is that it doesn't particularly dissect easily. So we can't say with ease where the obvious likely roles are. But what the IPPR report does do is it goes at least a couple of levels down. The first thing it says is, well, there are multiple issues here. Can anybody guess which the most likely tasks are to disappear in scenario 2? Anyone brave enough to be the first to say what they think those things could be?
White-collar jobs.
White-collar jobs, what's your name, sorry?
Tim.
Tim says white-collar jobs. Any advance on white-collar jobs? Travel agents. So you're a travel agent? Sorry, I didn't catch you. Go for it.
Data entry.
Data entry. Any other roles?
Software developers.
Software developers. About 5 years ago, we were telling all about anyone would listen. Let's make your kids be software developers. That's a really great job for 5 years' time. Is anyone regretting that now? Don't do it. They like it. Any advances on software development?
Lawyers.
Lawyers. Absolutely.
Pretty much any professional service.
Any professional service, right? Let's pause there. I want to talk to you about a slightly different report. Who's heard of the IMF? As you've all heard, the IMF, International Monetary Fund. So they conducted analysis, also published last year, where they did, is in my view, not quite as authoritative as the IPPR report, particularly for analysis of the UK investment management, because actually it's the IMF report as well, plus the international one. But they compared Brazil, the United Kingdom, and India, 3 very different economies. And they did that very deliberately. This is 1 second of one report. You can find this online as well. In just taking the UK, taking India, in the United Kingdom, how much of our economy do you think rests on the services sector? And a guess.
82%.
It's very high. But good guess. Thank you for guessing as well. Any advances on 82% higher or lower?
40%.
It's about it's about 50% roughly. Depends how you slice and dice the numbers. So actually, there are some stats that go higher, some that go lower. But let's say you're for argument's sake 50%. in India, their services sector is significantly lower. And actually, almost 50% of the population of India are in what the IMF calls the lowest two categories of employment. So essentially menial work, things that are absolutely not services and definitely not professional services. The IMF goes into detail about these different roles. I'll cut to the chase for you. It says that, to your point, the economies that stand to suffer first from the advent of artificial intelligence, particularly the increasing wave of ever more intelligent and ever more influential agentic AI, will be white-collar jobs in professional services sectors. So economies that are heavily, heavily reliant on services. And, I love the UK, but one thing it has done over the last 50 years is set itself up as the service provider to the world, stands to be highly impacted. Equally in India, the impact will be, at least for now, significantly lower, because a lot of those tasks cannot displace 50% of the population. I put my hand up for total displacements. Did you think I was an idiot when I did that? It's okay for this, don't worry. Occasionally I think I am. There is a fascinating book called How to Think About AI by Richard Susskind. If you haven't read it, I would definitely encourage you to buy it. It's actually quite a small book, fairly thin, but it is a deep book in the sense that it covers a great deal. And it goes into a lot of depth about the things it's taught. Richard Susskind is famous for doing talks all around the world on how the future of professions are going to be displaced entirely, ultimately, by things like artificial intelligence and advanced machine learning. One thing that he says very pointedly in that book is that all of us, sit around right now and think, well, how is AI going to displace what I do now? I just can't see it. That's the normal counterpunch to AI will displace your job. Well, I just can't see how it will displace my job. Well, with the greatest respect, that you can't see it means rather little. And I say that without any insult. Most of us didn't see ChatGPT coming. I remember the first time that I saw an LLM, which was middle of 2021, when a client showed it to me, I almost fell off my chair. We're still in my post-COVID land at that time. I was watching it, I'm thinking, what on earth is this? This is a step change. This is the stuff we've been talking about for 10 years. How have I missed it? Can you all remember roughly where you were the first time you played with ChatGPT? Maybe that question is more easily asked is, has anyone not played with ChatGPT? It's revolution in what it does. The other reason I mentioned Richard Susskind is that I had the pleasure of this company today. And one of the things we were talking about was that we've been used to technology going through the doubling process, where it doubles the capacity of speed over a roughly 10 to 5 year period. At the minute, we're seeing it doubling almost every 6 months. So the AI that we're thinking about now will be rubbish in about 12 months' time, because we'll be dealing with whatever the newest thing is. Now, I think that all jobs, every job that you have, and the jobs of all the people you know, and my job, and all the people I know, and even Matt's job, don't shoot me. I think all of the jobs can be replaced by AI. Every job. When that happens is up for debate, but that it happens, I think, is not. The 5-year estimate in IPPR, I actually think is a little bit optimistic. But ultimately, my best guess is that within 10 years, the world of work will look completely recognizable. There's a fantastic lawyer that I've worked with for a while who said to me a little while ago, the age of the time that you looked at the computer to read a contract, and the computer didn't also look at it with you and start to tell you what it thinks about it, that age has come and gone. How many of us could remember for the first time sitting in front of the white box in your desk, the one that was really deep to not all new desks. That was museum technology. The stuff we're dealing with in the next 5 to 10 years, that is going to be technology that, dare I say it, may actually start to make us look a little bit redundant. Does anyone disagree with me? Excellent. Let's take some questions. Go.
So the first, yeah, I think you are getting in some very interesting directions, but I think there's another kind of way we've kind of arrived at AI. And so from my point of view, I do generative imaging video. I'm not really chasing it to do the job for me. I'm just looking for it to get better. And so in a way, I disagree with what you're saying. I disagree with this kind of big displace because I think it's kind of, we've got novelty for cars that are right. We're not going to get another version of the car. The four wheels, the driving steering, you know, the rest of those is great. But from what you're saying, we've just gone from Model T forward to Tesla in about 6 months, you know, rather than 110 years at the moment. The car is still a car. It might drive itself. So I think we've arrived at the point where it is what it is. And now it's up to us to kind of like decide how we're going to use that and go forward. But I don't see it changing much what I'm doing, just getting better at the delivery and capability of it.
Thank you. And as someone who lives to argue, I'm really appreciative of the opposite opinion. Let's take another couple and I'll come back to you. Yeah,
yeah, I think I get what you're saying because we look at AI and look at it getting better and we can do sorts of wonderful things. But my own experience, I guess, in software development using AI is that, like so many things I've done before, this is a tool. This is a productivity tool. And I think I can speak for anybody in that person that this is that you are a long way from being something like doing this because it was the job. And I think what you're saying about it disrupting jobs as they stand now is absolutely true. But what I think the future of jobs is not jobs. I think it's just completely different jobs. It's people are seeing it. I think it's making use of the new tool. Because what like you were saying, it's not just humans that we do video components of generation or software. It just means they're there to guide to rather than hit the keys and rather than themselves.
So on that, the IPR report that I was referencing at the start, it talks, sorry, the INF report talks about the US and does comparative analysis through the 40s to the 2000s. To cut a long story short, I think from memory, 64% of the jobs that existed in America in the 2000s to 2010s did not exist in the 1940s. And that is an incredible amount of jobs when you think this is the biggest economy in the world. So maybe the argument goes, actually, what we're stepping into is a world where there'll be so many new jobs that actually we just don't know what those jobs are. And to say that there'll be so much displacement is nonsense. There will be replacements, jobs that are reimagined or created entirely for you. I had this debate with some members of the Cabinet Office very recently. Unsurprisingly, they also took issue with my this 9 largely. And one of them observed that if AI is to displace all jobs, then it would be the first technological revolution to do so, because actually we as a society or we as humanity have been through multiple instances of similar scenarios where technology has arrived and has disrupted. And yes, it's painful. Sometimes it even results in entire revolts, entire revolution. But it always ends with more jobs, albeit slightly different. My counter-argument, the counter-argument is AI an entirely new class of problem? And who's heard of the swing rides, by the way? Anyone heard of the swing rides? Yeah, so every time I do this part of the talk, everyone goes, what? Who knows how Australia got populated? What do most people think Australia does? Right. I'm sorry if I insulted any Australians. I have some Australian relatives. They take significant umbrage. Yeah, most people we say Australians, how Australian populated are British criminals, maybe. That's an Australian accent, by the way. Well, there's very little known in common knowledge about actually how it came to be, but the study of it is fascinating. I would encourage you to do it. Most of it is something called the swing riots through 1820 to 1850. Agriculture was a humongous part of our life. So if we had all been here, so if we've all been here in August in 1820 to 50, firstly, we'd have all had a very different relationship with each other, but we would all have stopped working in August, whatever our jobs were, whether we were farmer, I'm guessing there weren't any lawyers, whatever the jobs were, teacher, cook, churchman, whatever, we would all have stopped and we would have all gone out to the fields together. And we would all have worked for the farmer. He would have separated pay, and we would all have harvested together, and then we would have celebrated the harvest festival. That was for about 300 or more years the way things were done. In the 1850s, you get the advent of technology in the form of very basic, very rudimentary tractors, and they start to change how this process flows. But there are whole people like us, then, who actually make the most money, all the money they make in a year from that event. That's their economy. So they're positive for it. They're like, well, things are going on now, and I make a penny here and a coin there, but I'll make a load of money at harvest. I'll work day and night. And then the technology comes and takes it away. There are whole swathes of the British population, and not just in the UK, but in America and other places too, when the populace riots. They go to the farmers and they burn their buildings down. Farmers die, their families are killed. Not many, to be fair, but it happens. And then there was this big civic uprising, which is we cannot allow that kind of disorder to occur. And the British, to be fair, the British government comes out incredibly hard on anyone who riots. The punishment for rioting? Deportation or transportation. And where are you going? Now, down under, mate. Now, the interesting about that is a lot of the people who were prosecuted actually were not violent protesters, they were non-violent protesters. But they went anyway because of the political sensitivity. If you dared to riot, bearing in mind lots of the farmers were, for the most part, really wealthy landowners, you were gone. But ultimately, a lot of them, after the change of government around about 1850, they have a part of it. So what these people who were criminals actually weren't criminals at all. And the great story about Australia is it's not really populated by proper criminals, it's populated by political, and a lot of political prisoners. What are the origins there? I tell you all of that, partly because we as a society have gone through loads of these moments. The tractor, the combine harvester, the PC, in the Industrial Revolution. But I would argue to you that AI is not like that. AI is a new class of problem. Go for it, sir.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This is an entirely class of problem. I'm really interested in, by the way, the indigenous population thing. There's also another question about how anyone got to Australia. This is a big ocean.
Indeed.
And a whole other question about that. The displacement or replacement thing, I think you're right, that every job could be done by AI. The question is going to be, are the only jobs going to be managing the machines who are doing this? Well, who's going to be overseeing all this? But bigger than that, and this is a really big question, but I think you might be able to tackle it some way. What? I'm trying to how to phrase this. The whole premise of capitalism is about people produce and people consume. And if no one's working, I don't buy this, we're all going to kick back from the universal basically and have a great time. Because it's upended the whole reason why we spend money, it can't all just be leisure. Otherwise, who's doing stuff to buy stuff, to do stuff, to buy stuff, to do stuff, to buy stuff. So what does this do to the whole idea of capitalism if nobody has to work? Because I don't think everyone can just get back and chill.
What was your name? Sorry,
Dan.
Dan, that was a great question, and a big question. One of the very interesting counter arguments to what I just said is that actually, how do we pay for everything? We pay for it, for everything, mostly through a system of taxation, which is fundamental to our way of life and predominantly underpinned by simplistic expression of capitalism. So, if I don't work, if nothing else, I don't pay tax. If you don't work, you don't pay tax either. If 8 million people, according to the worst case scenario in the IPR study, don't pay tax in 2030, then we are losing a lot of revenue. And if you find any of the noise from Westminster, one thing you'll know is the public finances are tight. And Treasury is trying to fill a £20 million black hole very recently. Of course, it was the previous administration's fault. A line that I used to believe, but these days I'm a bit cynical. So how on earth do we deal with that problem? I should say that I am not at all persuaded by some kind of universal income thing. It doesn't appeal to my own sense of politics, morality. But I don't know is the actual answer. I'm not afraid to say so. I think there are points in time where this debate is so in flux that we should be able to say, oh, that's really hard. And I don't have a tried response to that. My best guess, and that's all it is that we will find that there will have to be a model of taxation that looks at the way that AI processes what it does and places a value on that, which is at least mathematically equivalent to the loss of income, so that there isn't a depreciation between those things. Ultimately, it could even generate more revenue. I say that as a theoretical thing. I'm only convinced myself, partly because of the digital sales tax, and then you've followed this as a sideline, but crikey, mighty, the mess that has created in an attempt to try and get Facebook, Amazon, Spotify, all of the massive companies that make a huge amount of revenue from the United Kingdom and pay very little tax in it, to try to pay some tax in it. Well, that was really controversial before Donald Trump. And I mean, who wants to guess what he thinks about it? Let's go for it. Sorry.
I've got a question for you around the timescales.
Yeah.
I was talking with a member of our team. He's lead strategist for a very, very large company. He really understands everything about it. And he was talking about, so using work, the speed or the acceleration of it. And my counterpoint to that was that no one's actually currently using it very well. We built a lot of companies, we show them how to use it. Most people have no idea beyond emails and blogs, that side of things. I'd love to understand your perspective on that. Do you think it's when agents come, then, because there's agents now, but they're not proper agents, when they actually come, is that going to be a tipping point where people have no option because they haven't done it? How do you see that play?
I mean, I do a lot of work with large corporates. I would entirely agree with that. Reflects my experience entirely. How do companies change what they do? Typically, one of three nodes will force that change. The first, the first that you have a visionary leader, someone who says, regardless of any external factor, I am absorbed with the reality of this, and I decided to make it so. It's a very entrepreneurial spirit. Probably in my lifetime, the person that I've seen a bit like that best, although I never knew him, was Steve Jobs. I would really recommend Walter Isaac's biography, by the way. But just this, let's make it so, even though no one else is doing it, or at least no one else is doing it, we want to express our version. So that is rare. That is very, very small. The second, which is far more common, is FOMO. FOMO. fear of missing out. So that is where you can't be bothered to learn. But as soon as you find out your competitor is already doing it, you are now expected. And I mean, I don't like that at all, but it's so common, especially in professional services. I mean, lawyers are like archetypal lovers. Some of them are, most of them are, I think, in my opinion. The idea that the computer could draft an idea as well as I can is ludicrous, ludicrous. Until literally someone else is doing it and then using AI. I mean, just not long ago, I think about 2 weeks ago, the Law Society approved the first AI law firm. Don't believe the hype. But the interesting thing about it is that their model is well, it's £2 a letter, it's £4 a contract, AI. Look at how human behind it, we're just going to tell you how it's going to do it. I want to pay loads of professional time to do it, you can. But what an interesting concept. And the one thing that did was made all else clear was that an AI fun is a very, very good motivator. And the third is that you have an existential moment, which is some kind of threat, some kind of attack, something that makes the entire leadership come around and go, oh my God, I'm going to get it. It's not the same as necessarily a competitive threat, it's typically a data breach or some kind of hack, some kind of compromise, something like that. That's a bit of a long answer, sorry.
Quick question, because I know you well, I can't agree with your version of events about Displace, and I think that your version can't come true, and it can't be allowed to come true for two reasons. One is that it would lead to Armageddon, and therefore our decision makers, our governments, our business leaders would have to do something to avoid that from happening. But much more importantly, don't use humans desire something more, and doesn't that ultimately determine what we're going to be prepared to accept as the norm? And I hope I'm right, and I think you're wrong, otherwise we're screwed.
Excellent. What a great question. We'll take the other two, and I'll try and tackle that one. That is good.
Oh, well, being in cybersecurity, we're on the edge of probably a global war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so how do you think the legal system will change given that and the attitudes and some of the positivity we can extend?
Okay. Well, very quickly on that. Never mind the legal system. How the democracies in the modern world have faced each other. And if anyone's been following the press in the last 7 days, Keir Starmer's announcement on Monday that we are aiming. What's the exact word? It wasn't a total commitment. It was like an almost total commitment, and therefore I'm very impressed and slightly appalled at his ability to not exactly commit. But he did say that we are aiming for 3% of our GDP to be spent on defence budget by 2030. Currently, it's 2.5. Now, as a policy, I don't necessarily have many issues with that. But the whole story arc is things are bad and we need to be ready for them to be worse. The way we address that is by involving our military through further investment and expansion. But in that story, in 1945, or even let's go slightly further back to 1936-7, was brilliantly told by only really one politician. Can any of you think who that politician was?
Really?
Winston Churchill, the only politician in Westminster who was stand up in Parliament saying we need to rearm now. We need to drop appeasement now. We need to stand up against Nazism now. Not later, but now. He was ostracized, hated, vilified, and they wrote about him like he was like a turd, horrible man, until 1940, at which point a complete bald face, and he's now a national hero. There are comparisons to be drawn between the rhetoric, but that in 1940 meant bullets, planes, it meant factories for bombs. In 2025, actually a lot of it means AI. It means systems within systems. It means meta systems. It means things that you can't even really comprehend. Saw some really fascinating AI defense tech. Haven't got to the MOD or work on it. Let's talk about it. But there are lots of brilliant minds about clever in the mind thinking about how do we fight a war when the principal thing in the war is tech and not people.
We ultimately won the war because of tech.
We actually did well enough because of tech,
But
absolutely.
it's a computer.
I mean, I'm sure Jeff was in here saying it was the British spirit, but I mean, I think I agree. I'm going to tackle this question back because I've really enjoyed how many of you wanted to argue with me as though I had given you my worst thing yet, but I have far more worse things than this. And one of those is a stat that came out just last week, and I offered this as a challenge to my friend's challenge, to mine, which is that, have any of you heard of collective AI or replica? These are AI systems that are a little bit like ChatGPT, but they're not. You can build a relationship with this particular AI. You can date this AI. You can actually have a very deep emotional connection with it. Some of these relationships are even sexual. How many UK registered users do you think there are of these systems since the last week? 1 million. And around the world, certainly in the US, that number is, I think, at about 10 million and rising. So, just pause and reflect that there are chunks of society that are actually building relationships entirely with systems that are replicating the human experience, the feeling of love, the feeling of appreciation, of sympathy when sympathy is needed, of argumentativeness when argumentativeness is needed. And these systems are significantly more advanced in how they converse. And it's alluring. It is appealing. It has, why go to the trouble of dating when you can do it with an AI system that is actually going to fulfill you, it's going to meet your needs, it's going to do all these other things for you.
It's not. It just says it's
So yeah,
it's not.
it just says it. Well, so in my challenge to your challenge, you can through all of these things say that actually our society is progressively moving, perhaps whether it knows it or not, towards a place where we are entirely dependent upon sophisticated machine intelligence, machine learning for all of our needs, including our emotional, spiritual, philosophical requirements. Now, your question, I think, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You posit that it is bad, because ultimately humanity is, humanity deserves more. Humanity should try harder to be more human. And my counter to that would be that it is incredibly hard to define ultimately what these things are. If any sort of long view analysis of what it means to be human, going as far back as 100,000 years or longer, the things that make us who we are is incredibly amorphous and incredibly complex. I mean, even the idea of nation state is very, in the reality of human history, an incredibly short thing. So maybe, just maybe, the thing that makes humans famous in the greatest art of history is that we created artificial intelligence, and that was our ultimate thing, the thing for which we are not remembered and disappear into history. Right, I'm going to pause there with that, because you've told me you want to talk about sustainability, and I would love to talk about sustainability. There'll be plenty of time for more debate. The Crips, as we said at the start, is a B Corp. Who knows what B Corp is, by the way? So there was this chap here behind argument about PK was a massive part of Crips's ambition to become B Corp, his vision, and he put a lot of his energy and time into this. It's an amazing thing because it's a statement that says the business we want to be responsible for the environment we live in, responsible for people who work in our buildings, and we want to make sure that we are increasingly making our impacts, our sustainability impacts, I think which is really good for the world. And we want to set up examples of a lot of them say, hey, look, we can do it, you can do it too. Yeah, how it works itself in really practical ways, like how can we try to be honest less? What can we do to reduce our carbon emissions? It's simple things like maybe we'll just use less paper or a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm really not doing it the justice it deserves, but I'm able to tease out a few of the basics so you actually can understand what I mean. And I say all of that because sustainability is really, really important to us. I don't count on them guessing probably important to you. However, there is an obvious, brilliant juxtaposition in all things AI when it comes to sustainability. There are three main pinch points in the sustainability discussion with AI. First is AI and water. The second is AI and carbon. And the third is AI and electricity. Now, obviously, there are the parts of that measuring Venn diagrams across linked, but they're all also somewhat separate. Let's have some of the audience pick one of those three and we'll start to talk about it. Yes, sir, which one do you want to pick?
Yeah, so electricity,
Yep.
in this case, and I want to connect it to the previous discussion.
Of course.
So my idea, I picked the category in the middle, so some displacement and some augmentation. Precisely because of the electricity cost. So I think that in 5 years, it would cost too much in terms of electricity resources, etc. Even if we already had systems that are super intelligent to displace a lot of people working. And this could, I think, give us even a hint to a solution in the sense that we should balance between cost and displacement. Like if to do one job, it costs less to have the person and the young rather than having
So
only
a cost benefit analysis of some kind.
yeah, if we think about it in those terms, I think that it's difficult to think that in 5 years we have all of the energy we need to displace jobs.
Well, okay. So there's a few things in that. I actually think that cost benefit analysis argument with no defense benefits is actually a fairly weak argument, partly because the productivity analysis of AI is broadly exponential, particularly as you start to extrapolate further out. The energy part is interesting. Here are some stats for you. These come from the Electric Power Research Institute from May of the last year. Worldwide data center electricity usage in 2022 totaled 300 million megawatt hours, which is a 45% increase on the same period in 2015. In the US, in 2023, data centers accounted for 4% of the total electricity consumption, which is equal to 150 billion megawatt hours or 14 billion households. Just pause and think about that. 14 million households. How many households do you think are in Brighton? More or less than 14 million. I don't really know Brighton, but I'm going to guess it's less than 14 million. An LLM, to search for an LLM, it uses approximately 10 times the amount of power as traditional Google search. So this was the search that gave us that stat. The standard search on Gemini, standard search on Google will use 0.3 watt hours, whereas the exact same search on Gemini will use 3.1 watt hours. So it's exactly 10 times. So you could go to both systems and say, who's that really annoying Chris local barrel? Search for both. It will take far more power to answer in the Gemini, for example, it will Google search. Is everyone following that? Does that make sense? Okay. So here are the projected trends from that study. Data generation soared, but it's likely to triple every 7 years. So that's their forecast. It's estimated that by 2028, going backwards, that would have been 7 years of this, that the rough amounts of energy will be 1.47 times 10 to the power of 14 million megawatts. Interestingly, the internet alone will be gigabyte 1.3 times 10 to the power of 10, which is an almost unfathomable amount of data. So, my question to you, assuming you follow some of that, which is basically the numbers are already big, and we're just going to get bigger as we what are our ethical obligations as a society when it comes to searching? For example, do you think that we should stop using ChatGPT and Gemini on search engine as part of a moral thing? Or is that actually a bit of nonsense? Who's up for that argument?
Is that any different to deciding to use the card to the supermarket?
Is it any different than deciding to use the card to go to the supermarket? Do you know, I never used to do that until I had kids. When I had kids, I was like, I'm coming everywhere I go, everywhere I go. It's funny how the brain could be your priorities change. I mean, the difficulty actually is this is very hard to avoid. Has anyone noticed what you see increasingly more? You do a Google search, what you get AI answer. Who's got WhatsApp? Anyone that got WhatsApp? Right. Anyone noticed the little O? I hate spams, by the way. Absolutely love it. Partly because I am, for a better or worse, a very conscious parent and worked very hard at stopping my kids from playing with various AI systems. And now they have this on WhatsApp, can't take it off. The list is mandatory if you think that great. You can talk to that system as much as you like. My son does, because I can see his WhatsApps. For the most part, it's coming up with funny raps about his system. They're not that funny, I think. But the amount of energy it uses is unbelievable. Now, it's kind of funny, and I'm kind of making it a bit of a joke, but actually, we spend a significant amount of time talking about how important the environment is, as we should. But we don't really talk about it in the context of AI. And a couple of you already mentioned that you work with corporates. I work with corporates. Up until about the middle of last year, one thing that corporates talked almost predominantly about, was how they were going to do square brackets, insert environmental promise square brackets. So that could have been, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030, excellent. Or we're going to be significantly more energy efficient by 2025, whatever the promise is. And greenwashing is sort of the allocation that gets called as problems. You would have noticed, if you were watching, that rhetoric is ever so slightly dense. And in America, I'm going to do a podcast if I remember, I'll send it on a link. There is some analysis that's been done which shows that the 10 biggest corporates have very quietly ditched their sustainability commitments. Why? Well, for the most part, because of one report. That report was the Google Sustainability Report from last March. What do you think it said? Well, spoiler alert, it's not great for the environment. It said that Google's own carbon emissions have increased by 47%. Google, one of the biggest companies in the world, its own CO2 had essentially increased by 50%. Why? Almost all of it was down to Gemini. When asked, Google essentially said, we are finding it incredibly hard to make these systems work without burning through unbelievable quantities of electricity. 14 million households worth of electricity and more. Please.
So when I think, And I am Australian, I'm not a convict.
Glad to hear it.
But I'm South Australian, that's why I'm not a convict. So just to challenge that premise, what I've kind of seen in the industries over the last few years, working with some of the larger tech companies, is yes, they are moving away from those diversity, equity, inclusion policies and environmental sustainability policies. You're absolutely right that AI infrastructure costs a lot of money. I recently read an article explaining how we actually need to change our venture capital funding, because the nature of AI costs are much more upfront and infrastructure-led than the SaaS space ever has been. And that's why your fast growth is not necessarily going to come from that upfront cost and trying to hit that fast growth quickly. You do have to invest in the infrastructure. Having said that, one of the things that I think about is, if we're not thinking about it from a regulatory perspective, we are thinking about it from a margins perspective. And what I do think is actually happening in the economy right now is a lot of people are going to be owning these systems, owning that infrastructure. They're actually going to be creating jobs, and those jobs are going to be more engineering-led, hardware engineering-led around these infrastructure systems, and how to find ways, perhaps internationally, perhaps through international sourcing and retrieving infrastructure materials from China or wherever, but finding ways to make those much lower costs so that they can get to that profitability quicker. Because at the moment, the upfront cost of actually mobilizing these technologies, Google can do it, others can do it, Bling's going really well, Microsoft's got the money. Not everyone else has the money for that kind of infrastructure. It's the biggest barrier to the market at the moment.
Yes, I mean, thank you for your question. And you're right about the barriers to entry cost is so high that essentially industry that's on 10 largest companies in the world. You just not going to be building your own LLM, or certainly not any LLM scale. I don't know if anyone saw this as an aside, which the British government just rolled out its own internal system who spent a lot of time talking about how interesting, how powerful that system was until on the back of FOIA request, they have to displace that actually was built on the back of Gemini. So, yes, whoever you are, wherever you are, even if you're a national government, you're probably going to be relying on one of the 10 big US corps for their stuff. Is it going to, I suppose my argument in response to yours would be that I just wonder if we will see such rapid acceleration and development that we will see systems building themselves and not necessarily needing people to do that. And whether the development and market in robotics will be so rapid as to mean that even hardware engineering is a job that can better be done by a more space system.
Yes.
I think that is what will happen, but I understand why people don't want it to happen. Let's talk, yes.
Yeah, I'm wondering how I think regulation can keep up with the speed of the technology and what lessons can we learn from social media. Because that was meant to be a utopia socially, but of course a lot of social, political issues.
I mean, I am a lawyer, but I'm a rare one in the sense that I think that regulation is a total reality, and its speed is embarrassing, and we should all be embarrassed by it. Who's heard of the Online Services Act as an example? Was it for a long time the Online Services Bill? Something was called the Online Content Bill. It was the bill that was meant to address lawful but harmful content on the internet. So, and the classic example was, I think it was Millie Dowler, social harming online, being exposed to content that for a vulnerable teenager was incredibly toxic and was about the benefits of self-harm and stuff that makes you stomach turn. It's not illegal. That's Paul Infect, that's not illegal. And what this bill was trying to do was say, well, okay, let's deal with the legal but harmful content. It ultimately struggled to do that in many respects. How long do you think it took? 7 years to go from concept to law. And actually, it's only coming into force now. It's going to be enforced by a regulator that, in my personal opinion, is going to struggle to regulate it. I'll keep my opinions polite. So, no is a simple answer. When I could find another multitude of examples, I worked on the original GDPR consultation started in 2012. It took until 2016 to get that done. And then in 2016, we had a 2-year grace period ending the 25th of May 2018, the day which I'm sure you all celebrate, but like I do. It's like my third child's birthday. Here's an idea for you though. Why not have AIs thinking about and proposing and debating and possibly even passing new laws? And here's another thought. We live in a reflective democracy. For better or worse, it is the system that we have, and to a large extent, it is a system, it's a thing that we ought to be relatively proud of. It isn't. Churchill described it as the best and worst form of government, but in many respects, it's deliberative. This is what makes it valuable. But the difficulty is to be deliberative, is to be reflective, and that requires time. And humans typically require quite a lot of time, especially if things are really hard. You know, the obvious argument back to me about the online homes bill is that stuff is really hard. It's really hard to pass a bill like that. You know, things that aren't unlawful, that are harmful, that should be really hard to do. The counter to that slightly is that is already, that censorship already occurs. It already occurs because most of the content that you will see on social media is edited and is predicted and has increasingly complex AI filters so that you will see things that you like. And at the right time, in the right place on your feed, things will be dropped for you. This is all very known. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you'd like to read a fascinating book on that, by the way, I would highly recommend Shujaa Zuboff, The Age of Space Capitalism, which is an extraordinarily good book on that topic. What lessons can you learn? Well, I would say, very controversial, but then one of the most important things is to maybe just think about how AI can help us to create better and quicker laws that do a better job of capturing the mood and essence of society. I said earlier, by the way, that I was enjoying how much you were all not enjoying my bombshell around work displacement because I knew I had way more crazy stuff in the locker room. And one of those several things, I'm just going to pull it out, throw it out, is that one of the very interesting predictions for AI, not in the next 10 years or in the next 5 years, but actually in the next 2.5 to 3 years, is that the systems that we all currently have that reside here will be able to start thinking and monitoring in a way that we have simply not understood at all. And you will have very little choice about it. The choice is essentially have or don't have a readily collectible device that can instantly understand your political persuasion, your religious belief, your family, your community, your geography. If there was a thing in the world that could be harnessed to instantly capture the will of the people and to do it with a degree of accuracy that is vastly more accurate mathematically than any poll, any survey, wouldn't it be here? In all of our pockets, all of the things that you know, all of the things that you publish, and dare I say it, all of the things that you don't. Yes, ma'am, I'd like you.
I just want to backtrack a little bit to some of the things you're saying about sustainability, carbon, water, and solar, and how we can increase. I wonder if, I guess I'm sort of speculating a little bit here, I'm looking for some sort of feedback on it, which is that because we've been presented with this thing, has that not just exponentially increased the curve of our usage as we naturally start looking for new things and new search engines in this way that we've been given as a new tool? Will that just not drop off and we start looking for pictures of tenants having to just with benefits, right? And those kind of crazy things will be done. But also, I think there's a second side to it as well, which is, we've all been hearing for a long time about carbon and the output. So I was on waiting back time to take it. We've all been looking at carbon for quite a while. I'm wondering if there is a cap where it becomes, I've never had a number where it becomes dangerous. And so, okay, the will increase by 50%, but what does that actually mean on a world level basis? So at the moment, I think, carbon makes up X percentage of the atmosphere. At what point do we need to stop it before it starts to destroy our atmosphere? It's one thing I've not heard, and I would be interested in. I've also heard very recently someone say, surely the best answer to carbon is that trees like carbon, right? They just destroy all trees and that absorbs the carbon. So there's a kind of couple of interesting changes in people's perceptions going on, but one will be how much, where is that?
Okay, well, in full transparency, I haven't seen the report that says the limit is here. And I think that's partly because the science around particularly carbon capture and also climate temperature is debatable. Now, I would say that there are various parts of that that are actually so scientifically clear as to not really be debatable. And if you're looking for a really good authority on that book, I would strongly recommend Mark Berners-Lee's Climate Truth. But there is at least, if we're looking to be objective and rational and to weigh all the evidence available to us without our political bias, whatever that may be, there is at least some evidence that suggests that there is debate around carbon capture. And that may be why there is no report that says the ceiling is here. Partly because I imagine if that were to be published, it would just be snubbed in the political, from the political side that says, no, we will have nothing to do with that. That's just false science, which the currency is not a sign of what I think. I think a big part of the issue with carbon is that it's the trees argument I find really funny, partly because I'm pretty sure actually it's the ocean the biggest absorber of carbon. I'm not sure I've read that. It might be benefit, but also trees take a lot of time to grow. And it just drastically simplifies something which is vastly more complicated. Here's a counterpoint. Why not let AI calculate the best way to do this? For a long time, humans have been debating whether or not the planet's warming or not. I would say that science is absolutely unavoidable. The planet is warming. Then they have been debating the cause of the warming. Is it actually a natural cycle? Is it man-made? Again, I would say the evidence is overwhelming that it is man-made. There are two excellent books that touch on both of this. One of them is Henry Kissinger's The Age of AI. I thoroughly recommend it to you. If you've enjoyed much of the stuff we've been kicking around, you will love that book. There's lots of fun to be had in there. And one of the parts of that book, which is interesting, is that it says, well, let's assume for a second that we get to a place where there is AGI. Do you want to know if you want to say AGI? Artificial straight away. Artificial general intelligence. This is, in the simplest of terms, systems that are easily as clever as we are. One way that they could possibly make us extinct would not necessarily be to deliberately go up and be like, get the humans. But it could be to run an open systems analysis on the environment of Earth. And to look at it and say, there is a very obvious cause of a problem here, which is mathematically identifiable. And it's not sort of politics and theory debate, simply we're looking at maths, so we'll conclude that mathematically this is a cause. The cause, concerningly, is the human race. What can be done about that? Another alternative that is, you could, without much need for imagination or creativity, think of a world where an AGI system can say, well, how can I make my systems more efficient? One of the things I can do is to eradicate rust. How do I do that? Well, the big cause of rust is oxygen. How do I deal with that? Well, one thing I could do is remove oxygen very quickly. The less oxygen, the less rust. And there is a very obvious loser in that case as well. But it wouldn't necessarily be hunting us to take it away. They may not even calculate that that's the thing. Arguably, until it's too late. I want to give you some stats of carbon, by the way, because I haven't done that yet. The first study from 2019, so pre-ChatGPT on carbon, showed that it takes about 5 cars to build an early model LLM. So all of the carbon that the average car emits through its entire life takes about 5 cars. There's some really interesting things that came out of that study. One of them is that the average human life emits 11 million pounds, produced in America, of carbon. But not the average American. So the average human is 11 million. But the average American is 36. That's like, what are they doing over there? I feel like I just want to go over. And the irony would be like, that was the carbon flight over, just trying to figure it out. But I feel like, is anyone there? Am I missing something off here? Let's do that one in the day. Question in the back.
I've got every confidence in you, Bella, and still we have to check your problems. This is right, with your everything. But in terms of what I tend to hear about, which is dystopia and utopia, I think one, it's very simple, and two, it's in the hands of everybody in this room individually. Now, there are 2 paths that we could go. One is utopia, which is basically realizing that if we manage this technology to become a good producer of wealth, we just share it amongst everybody. And you have something like the universal wage. And if you don't know the universal wage, have a look at it, because some sort of system like that just says, well, when you choose your own work, it's just as happy as if you work for the boss. So, universal wage is the route to the utopia. The dystopia, which we've already got, is a culling of the population. That lots of people will be considered surplus to requirements for the world. And they will be culled. And if you don't believe me, just look towards Israel. And under our very noses, a massive culling is going on. There are far worse ways of doing that. But nonetheless, that is the story. So it's actually in your hands, every one of you, to find ways of understanding something like universal knowledge and sharing wealth, or concentrating wealth and getting rid of surplus population. It's up to you. It's in your hands. Don't anybody say it's a big monster, it's big or evil, because you're the ones that built this thing. Cheers.
Well, do you know what? Despite politically disagreeing with significant chunks of that, I actually agree with the sentiment. I do think it's in our hands. And I always love touring, speaking to audiences and dropping massive AI bombs on them. It's always great fun to watch, because people are like, oh my God, we're dating Romans. But I actually do believe that the power to shape the future is ours. And I don't just believe that because it's quaint or cute, and I have absolutely no political affiliation. I just think it's true. And I think the version of history that I enjoy looking at the most is the one where, despite the odds, brave people get together and say, this is the kind of future I want, and I think you want it too. And I don't know how hard it's going to be to make it happen, but I'll try and make it happen with you. And if we don't make it, then at least we don't make it together. And if we do make it, well, crikey, it would have been worth doing. One of my favourite versions of that story, and there are many, is the story of Palais Royal, France, circa 1730, 40, and 50, is the beginnings of the French Revolution. Now, French Revolution still a little bit politically sensitive, even in France. But you had people in communities just like this, with rooms pretty much this size, getting together whole conversations that were essentially, well, why is France not working? Why are the royals doing all the things that they're doing? And why are people starving on our streets? And what can we do to fix that? Why don't we start thinking about what a different kind of future will look like? Why don't we have some of the first early expressions of radical revolutionary convention? And from it, you get the French Revolution. Yes, you get a lot of bloodshed and heads cut off. And from that, you get the US Republic. And you get all these incredible ideas, but it all starts with, to the point, my great friend at the back made, a group of people just getting together and saying, even if it costs us our lives, then it does. And we'll fight for it because it's worth fighting for.
Okay, actually, this is a question. It's something I've looked at, so I've looked over. Does anybody here, or of you, see the AI 2027 predictions?
AI 2027 predictions.
There's a site called AI 2027.
I don't think so.
Which is incredibly well researched. It gives two scenarios, and it has two ethical companies, one in America called Open Brain, one in China called Deep Scent. And the reason I'm kind of asking is because I've just looked over this. It's incredibly deep. There's a lot of graphs which show this kind of curve. Basically, what happens is,
Sorry, we're running out of time. So quick.
There's two scenarios. In 2027, we either slow down both China and America, or AI is going to kill us all. I'm saying it's a guy from OpenAI that left early, knew all the main founders. They've researched it very deeply. I saw an interview the other day. He said, we have done more research. We now think it's 2028.
Okay. I think, well, there's cheer, just a cheer. Genuinely, it's fine. I think, well, the US is spending unbelievable sums of money on AI development. This year, the Human AI Institute Stanford, 2 months ago, published a report. You can check it out online, and it's that they have spent already more, 24% more than China spent, and 28%, no, it must be more, maybe 50% more than UK spent in the same comparable period. It's all in the hundreds and hundreds of billions. And a lot of it is obviously Silicon Valley and driven by the US capital machine on the West Coast. China is investing incredible sums as well, and lots of it is state funded, state sponsored, and state supported. They make a secret of that, and it's not necessarily, I'm not suggesting that either of those points is wrong. What I'm saying is the rate of spend in both of those territories is incredible. It's far, far more than the UK. And how likely is it that either of those is going to voluntarily slow down? I think it is highly, highly improbable. And that is because of geopolitics. That is because, as Kissinger and others have said, that AI is in many respects comparable to the post-Cold War nuclear arms race circa 1965, 70, 75, where we had a situation where essentially the US and Russia were just trying to out-nuke each other, not literally, but metaphorically. So I know roughly how many nuclear warheads the United Kingdom has. It's about 250. All of which at the moment can only be launched from a submarine. The plan is partly to change that. Do you know roughly how many Russia has about 2,000 in the States. It's about 2,900. They've been bringing them down. The point of all of that is how many nuclear bombs does it take to put out the planet? Not many. But that was never the point. The point was, look how more powerful I am than you. Now, if you extrapolate the logic of that into an AI battle, even if to your point, the US is so unpredictable, guys, just get really dangerous. The likelihood of China doing that is very slow. Even if China turned around and said, you know, this is getting really dangerous, the likelihood of the US doing that is really nil. And what's even more likely is that they say publicly will not be matched privately, because that's just not how monetary politics work. But possibly, the advent of AI will bring about a complete sea change in geopolitics for one of two reasons. The first is that it democratizes access to knowledge. You don't need to be in Europe to build an incredible startup. You could be in Africa. You could be in places where, until very recently, the economy is very weak. Why? Because AI democratizes knowledge and it brings access to systems in incredible speed in a way that we've just never seen before. A second alternative, and I'm conscious I have to wrap up, I think that could change very quickly the shape of geopolitics. It's not just the advent of AGI, which is essentially superpower systems equivalent to human performance. It would be the arrival in the course of that projection of non-biological sentient entities. That is to say, systems that are firstly aware of you, but more importantly, and far more interestingly, aware of themselves. I'll end it there.
Well, it's a good job we picked up a lightweight subject. What can we say? Man, absolutely outstanding. Huge round of applause. And what we do is we get Matt to give you the notes of those books and so on you recommended and then publish that and it's up to you all that access. Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. That was brilliant. So now I'm going to hand over to Lee, who's my co-lead for ethics and governance. We're just going through a couple of surveys. You've got your Mentimeter up and running. You can answer the questions and you can contribute. But once again, thank you, Matt. Outstanding. Lee?
Okay, so have you all got access to the Mentimeter? So, first question, which event type would you prefer to join next time? Think so. Okay. We good? So the next one for all of you, the companies that you work in or individually, how do you use AI tech? Next one. So on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel that Brighton AI is achieving its goals? And these are the goals that we have. Next one. So what, in your experience, share your biggest challenge for AI adoption, whether that's personally
or within your organisations? Where are we finding these challenges for adoption? Okay, great. So thank you very much. So that's the end of the survey. And just to summarise, short summary, two huge topics. So we started the journey thinking about utopia or dystopia. You know, utopia where AI is good for all. Dystopia where you have authoritarianism and you've got scarcity. I think we talked a lot about job displacements and there was a lot of reactions to that. I think the general thought was that it's the time, when will it happen? And then we looked at, you know, can it even replace our emotions with relationships? And then we looked at sustainability, and maybe that is one of the barriers to AI adoption because of costs, barriers to entry. And then, you know, we talked about the FOMO, the organisations fearing that others are going to get ahead of them, and maybe even countries fearing that they will get ahead of them could create a race. And I think in the end, it probably is a balance. And what determines that balance is probably us and whether we want AI for good or not. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. I think this time we did a little bit of housekeeping. We've got an event that we've been asked to promote tonight, which is this group looking at an event on the 7th of July at the Old Ship Hotel. We have also got an event being run by Rose. Rose, do you mind standing up just where you go so you know who you are? Very successful workshop that Rose is running, and it's all, I don't know how much fear is involved versus code. I hope the balance is in the correct direction, otherwise I won't be going down. But it's done the 15th, it's July the 10th, great event. And remind you again, we've got July the 4th event, which is Evolve 25 from us in Brighton. And we've also got the offer of the co-working week at no cost 16th of June here at Plastics. So it just remains me to say a big thank you, not to Graham, because he's not well, but we will send our best wishes. But a huge thank you again to Matt Holman of Crips LLP, came down all the way from London to be with us tonight. Well done, Matt, thank you. And we're going to thank our amazing audience. So turn to your left and pat the person on your left on the back and thank them for coming. And the same to the person on your right. And the person in front of you and the person behind you. Oh my God, how much life is in the room? This is insane. Also, I want to say a big thank you to Plastics. Where's Plastics? Where's Sam? Thank you, Sam, and we're seeing the ladies tonight. So we're taking a couple of months off now. Our Brighton AI event is going to be with Evolve 25. And then we're taking August off to go on holiday. And when we come back to the Emergent AI world, that is the UK, that will be September. So thank you all for coming. Safe journey home. Brilliant. Keep contribution up. Well done. Thank you very much.
Get your agents.
Ian.
Yeah, that's.